All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly, but with a twist.
A twist, huh?
Yeah, we're going to look at it through a Catholic lens.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The goal isn't to turn it into a religious film or anything like that,
Right.
but to see how it kind of resonates with some of the big Catholic ideas.
Exactly, yeah. Sin, grace, justice, redemption, it's all there, even if it's not explicitly religious.
Exactly. It's fascinating how a film set in a brutal, lawless world like the Civil War
Yeah,
actually kind of mirrors, I think, the Catholic understanding of a world tainted by original sin.
absolutely. It's like the filmmakers, without even realizing it, created this world that reflects that brokenness.
Yeah, it's really striking how the film portrays those consequences of sin, like you were saying. The Civil War, the bounty hunting system,
Right, right.
all that, just complete disregard for human life.
The constant deception, the betrayal, it's all there.
It's all there.
And, that really ties into this idea of homo viator humans as pilgrims on a journey through this broken world.
Exactly. We're not meant to be comfortable here. This world is a testing ground. It's all about those choices we make.
Right, and the characters in the film are constantly facing these moral dilemmas, like Blondie the good, he's a bounty hunter, but he still has this code of honor.
Yeah, he's not a saint, but he does seem to have this innate sense of right and wrong.
Right, it's like that concept of natural law, that God-given sense of what's good and what's evil, even in a lawless world like that.
And then you have Angel Eyes the Bad, who embodies just pure evil. He's got no remorse. He embraces treachery.
It's almost like he represents that complete rejection of good. Like, from a Catholic perspective, you almost wonder if he's beyond redemption.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
It is. It's one theologians have debated for centuries.
And then there's Tuco, the ugly. He's somewhere in between. He's driven by self-preservation, but he's not all bad.
Right. There are these moments where you see a flicker of conscience, a bit of vulnerability.
Yeah, like that encounter with his priest brother.
Oh, absolutely.
It's such a powerful scene. Really highlights that inner conflict between, sin and grace.
It's like he's constantly wrestling with his better nature.
Exactly. And that struggle is something we can all relate to, right?
Absolutely. That tension between our sinful nature and our desire for goodness, that's the human experience in a nutshell.
And it's a theme that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly explores in such a powerful and, I think, universal way.
I completely agree. It's interesting how the film tackles different kinds of sin, too, not just the big ones.
Right. What do you mean?
Well, it shows those everyday failings, those little compromises we make that we try to downplay.
You mean like those venial sins we talk about in the church?
Exactly. Dishonesty, greed, selfishness, even just lacking charity towards our neighbor.
Right. And the film shows how those seemingly small sins can actually snowball into much bigger betrayals.
Absolutely. It's like that saying, sin begets sin. One little act of selfishness can set off this whole chain reaction of harm.
And that's where redemption becomes so important, right? Breaking that cycle.
Absolutely.
But before we get into that, there's another aspect of sin in the film that I think is worth exploring. That idea of social sin.
Oh, that's a really important one.
So we've talked about individual sin, but what about the ways in which whole societies become complicit in evil?
That's exactly what social sin is all about.
And what better example than the Civil War itself?
Right. This senseless conflict driven by greed, pride, lust for power.
It really highlights how sin isn't just a personal matter. It can infect entire cultures and systems.
It's a powerful message and one that's very relevant to us today, even outside of the context of the film.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we all have a responsibility to resist those systems of sin, to work for justice.
To create a more humane and compassionate world.
Exactly. So as we continue our deep dive, let's keep this idea of social sin in mind. It's not just about the individual characters.
Right.
It's about those larger forces that shape their actions and create the conditions for evil to thrive. And that's a reminder that we all have a role to play in combating sin, both in our own lives and in the world around us.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. It's not just about analyzing a film.
Yeah.
It's about using it as a lens to examine our own beliefs, our own struggles, and our own responsibility to live out the gospel message.
And it's a responsibility that we all share, no matter where we are on our spiritual journeys.
Exactly.
It's interesting when you think about all that sin and evil in the film, how the good, the bad, and the ugly handles judgment. It's not just like earthly consequences, but this sense of divine justice.
Yeah, it's subtle, but the film definitely seems to operate under a certain moral order, like that graveyard scene. It's almost like a visual representation of the Last Judgment.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way.
Right. Each character's fate kind of lines up with their choices. Like Angel Eyes, he embraces evil, no remorse. And he gets a pretty fitting ending, you know?
Yeah, pretty violent.
Violent end, yeah. And then you've got Tuco, he's selfish, but he's not pure evil. He gets punished, sure, but he survives.
Right.
And then you have Blondie. He tries to do what's right. He even shows mercy at times, and he makes it out okay. Relatively unscathed.
It's like the film is saying that even in this crazy random world, there's still this underlying order. Like, actions have consequences.
Right. And that's a very Catholic idea, isn't it? That we're all accountable for what we do. There's a divine scale of justice, you know?
Yeah, totally. But the film doesn't just show, like, pure punishment, right? There's also mercy woven in there.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with Blondie. Like, he could have killed Tuco so many times, but he doesn't.
He spares him, even though Tuco betrayed him, like, over and over.
Exactly. And that restraint kind of reflects the Catholic idea of justice as being restorative. It's not just about punishing. It's about giving people a chance to change.
Like, Blondie becomes this almost like an instrument of divine mercy, even though he's not a perfect guy himself.
Right.
And it makes me think about grace, too. You know, that unmerited gift from God.
Yeah, grace, such a powerful yet mysterious concept.
It's hard to show that on film, but I think The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly hints at it in subtle ways.
I think so too.
Like when Tuco keeps escaping death, like, is there a higher power intervening there, giving him another chance?
Maybe it's open to interpretation, right? Maybe it's just luck. Maybe it's a grace nudging him towards, repentance.
And what about how they all end up at the gold? Like, is that coincidence or is it Providence, like, guiding them towards some purpose?
Right. Free will versus fate. Do we control our lives, or is there a divine plan?
It's a big question. And the film, it doesn't give a straight answer. But I think that ambiguity makes it really thought-provoking.
It does. It makes you confront that mystery of God's will, how it works with our choices and all that.
Yeah. And even though it's this brutal world they're in, the film doesn't say they're just puppets of fate.
Not at all. They're always making decisions, weighing their options, and those choices have real consequences.
So it affirms free will, even in a world that can feel predetermined.
Yeah, I think so. It reminds us that we're not just passengers in our own lives. We have the power to choose good or evil, to follow grace or reject it, and those choices shape who we are.
That's a powerful message.
It is, and it's central to Catholic teaching. We're called to be co-creators with God, to make choices that align with His will.
Which isn't always easy, especially in a world with so much temptation and suffering.
We're right. It's not easy.
But, like we see in the film, even in those dark situations, we can choose love, mercy, actions that bring us closer to God.
Exactly.
It all comes back to that question. Which character do we identify with? Who would we be in that world?
Would we be like Angel Eyes, ruthless, driven, or Blondie, practical but with a sense of right and wrong? Or would we be Tuco, flawed but still capable of good?
I think that's a really important question for us to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it makes us confront our own weaknesses, our own aspirations.
Makes us examine our conscience. Are we living virtuously? Are we seeking grace? Are we merciful to others even when they don't deserve it?
Those are tough questions, but they're at the heart of our faith.
And they're woven all through the good, the bad, and the ugly. The film doesn't give easy answers.
No.
But it makes us think about these huge themes.
And how they apply to our lives.
Wow, as we wrap up this deep dive, I feel like we've really uncovered something special about this film.
Yeah, it's more than just a Western, It's seen through that Catholic lens. It takes on this whole other depth.
It is amazing how a film set in such a brutal world can be so thought-provoking for people of faith.
Right. We've covered sin, grace, judgment, even providence.
Yeah, and it's all right there. It's woven right into the story.
And the film doesn't shy away from those tough questions either.
No, not at all. Like the whole idea of human nature, good versus evil, trying to find meaning in this chaotic world, it really makes you think.
It does, and it doesn't try to give you easy answers. It just invites you to wrestle with it.
As people of faith, yeah.
In a complex world.
For me, that's what elevates it beyond just entertainment. It challenges us to think about our own beliefs.
Our choices.
Yeah.
How we live out the gospel.
In a world that really needs it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a call to action, too. To be agents of grace.
Yeah.
To work for justice, to strive for holiness.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard.
And that's a good note for our listeners to take away. Think about where you see these themes in your own life.
What choices are you making?
Yeah.
How can you contribute to a more just and compassionate world?
Because that's what our faith is all about, right?
Putting those truths into action.
Being more like Blondieism, guided by justice and mercy.
Even when the world rewards ruthlessness.
Right, and remembering those glimmers of grace, those little redemption.
Those reminders that God is always there, working in our lives.
So as we finish up here, I encourage you to go back and watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly again.
With a fresh perspective.
Yeah, not just as a classic Western, but as a reflection of our own spiritual journeys.
The challenges and the hope.
Well, until next time, everyone, keep seeking truth, keep pursuing goodness, and keep the faith.
And God bless.